My name is Asia Sampson, and today on Baptism Overland, we are installing comms. It is National Preparedness Month. Now, I will not pretend that I am some hardcore prepper, but I do consider myself to be a little bit more prepared than most people. Now, being prepared doesn't mean you're the person that has to have 20 pairs of gas masks and 50,000 rounds of ammo just waiting for to hit the fan. I live in the South. And living here means that we have to deal with hurricanes every season. And if you aren't prepared, if you don't have certain things in place, it's going to be a really, really rough ride. And today I'm going to be doing something that I should have done a long, long time ago, and that is comms. Now, if you're not the preparedness kind of person and it's not something that you've ever really given a lot of thought about, then you might wonder, well, what the hell do comms have anything to do with preparedness? A lot. It's not just being able to talk to one another when you're hitting the trails. Perfect example, when Hurricane Sally came through our neighborhood, the power goes out. And along with that, cell service goes out. And there was no way for us to communicate to one another or listen to weather statements or listen to updates on what's going on with traffic. And the only way we were able to do that is through radio communications. One of the ways we used radio communications was to keep in touch with the people back at the house while a couple of us drove around the neighborhood, checked for damages in our surrounding area, as well as checked the local gas stations and grocery stores to see what was still open. What's good with radio communications is that it's not tied to the cell service. And it's not really tied to any kind of electrical power because you put batteries in it or you charge it up with your vehicles. So yeah, radio communications is vital. And today I am going to be tackling some of the things that I've been lacking, mainly a fixed radio unit in the Jeep. There are a ton of different options out there, but the ones you're going to probably hear about a lot are FRS, GMRS, HAM, and CB. Now I have to assume that if you're watching this video, it's because you already have a good grasp on the differences between each one, and you are just here to watch my install and review of this particular unit that I got for the Jeep. I'm not here to tell you what's better or not. My rule is this. I usually tell people, don't follow the crowd. Do you? But when it comes to radio communications, you kind of want to follow the crowd, because if you have a radio that no one else has, then who are you going to talk to? I'm going to stick with GMRS. I already have my GMRS license. Everyone in my squad rolls with GMRS or can at least tap into GMRS channels, and it's just really easy to use. Now, when it comes to GMRS, you basically have two options. You can go with a mobile setup or you can go with handheld. This is the handheld I've had for years. This is the Midland MXT275 FRS/GMRS handheld radio, and what that means is with FRS channels, you are able to use this like a regular walkie-talkie. In fact, I had bought this way before I even had my GMRS license, used all the FRS channels like a regular walkie-talkie, and when I got my license, then I was able to use all the higher watt channels that are available on here. Not only have I used this to communicate with all the vehicles in my convoy, but we also use it around camp, give it to the kids, let them play with it. I've also handed it off to people in those times where I needed someone to spot me from the outside when we're going down a trail. We've also used it during the storm to listen to weather reports and weather statements. And when we go hiking, my wife and I use this so that we can communicate with one another in the event that someone gets too far ahead the trail that we can't even see each other anymore, which is mostly my wife because she's a much more avid hiker than I am. There are just some things that handhelds can do that fixed units cannot. These are also not very expensive. A pair of these, $70. And you also get a charging dock. You just drop it in there, it'll charge it up for you without you having to worry about replacing the batteries. Because that's one of the downsides of having handhelds, is that you do have to charge them up. You do have to keep fresh batteries in them, because the last thing you want is to have some sort of emergency situation, power goes out, or you need to communicate and your batteries are dead. Now, the other downside about having a handheld is that the ranges on these are not going to be very far. When you go and buy it, the box might say 5 to 10 miles of range. That's crap. Unless you're actually seeing a person 10 miles out, clear line of sight, nothing in the way, then maybe. But when you have trees and houses and hills and all that stuff, you're probably not going to get that kind of range. Now, if this was a dedicated GMRS radio, then you can remove the antenna and put a longer whip antenna and widen your range. But because this is a FRS GMRS combo, it has FRS channels in here, then the antenna on these have to be fixed per FCC regulations. And it's because of those downsides that I decided to get a fixed unit. Having a fixed unit will basically just compensate for the things that this cannot do. This will still stay with me though. This will still stay in the Jeep because we still need these. We need these around camp. We need it when we go hiking. And I still need to be able to hand something to someone when they're spotting me from the outside. But having a fixed unit in the vehicle now, well, my range is going to be wider. I'm going to have much wider range with a longer antenna. Plus, I don't have to worry about keeping it charged up because the vehicle charges it up. Those type of reasons are why I want to get a fixed unit. But let me show you what it is that I decided to install. The Midland MXT275 Micro Mobile 15-watt GMRS two-way radio. Wow, that's a lot to say. This unit has been widely popular in the overlanding community simply because Midland had stripped down the GMRS radio and made it as simple as they possibly can. If you are a hardcore GMRS guy and you want to have full control over your unit, this is probably not going to be for you. This is more the entry-level unit for all of us who are still learning, finding our way around GMRS and want to be able to use it right out of the box without having to do a lot of programming or trying to figure things out. This is considered to be an FCC-compliant, clean signal GMRS. And what that means is when I was researching what unit to put in the vehicle, one of the questions I asked was, well, can I just get a ham radio and then program in some GMRS channels, use it like a GMRS, and then one day when I get my ham license, I can now have a unit that has both ham and GMRS? Well, it's illegal to do that. You are not supposed to use a ham radio as a GMRS radio. But you will also have a lot of guys tell you that no one in the history of ever has ever been given a citation or been put in jail for using a ham radio as a GMRS. Now, you can do what you want, but for me personally, I just didn't want to take that risk. I just wanted to get a unit that I know is within regulations, it's compliant, and I'm not going to get in trouble. Even if no one has ever gotten in trouble by it before, it's just a straight GMRS radio, and I have a license for it, so I know I'll be good. This is a 15-watt radio. I know there are units right now that have up to 50 watts, but for what I need it for and what I'm using it for, 15 watts is more than enough. This also has 15 channels, and if you're aware of the GMRS spectrum, then you'll know that the GMRS spectrum has 22 channels. This has 22 channels, but the reason why this has 15 is because channels 8 to 14 have been put aside for FRS use. It's basically very low power, it's only 0.5 watts, and many of these radios are way too powerful to transmit anything on such low wattage. So what Midland decided to do, so that there's no confusion on this unit, they just deleted channels 8 to 14 altogether, and you have channels 1 to 7 and then 15 to 22. This also has 8 repeater channels, so if you want to transmit your message through those repeaters, you can do so. And if you're not aware of what repeaters are, they're basically antennas that are really high up, and you can just bounce your message on that, and then they will relay your message to whoever you're trying to talk to, which basically extends your range for miles. So let me show you what's inside this kit. Basically everything you need to get started is all in here. Instruction manual, sticker, yay! Microphone mount, power cable, your standard 12-volt socket that goes into any cigarette port. Other side goes into the back of the unit, and it's already all fused up. I am going to be cutting this off though because I'm going to hardwire this directly into the Jeep. Antenna. This is a tiny antenna that it comes with. One side plugs into the back of the unit, and the other side is actually magnetized. So you can just drop this on the hood. If it's an area where it's fiberglass and you can't just magnetize it, they do give you a magnet with some 3M tape in the back. And in the main unit, look how nice and clean this is. And you're probably wondering, well, where the hell are the buttons? Where's the LED display? There aren't any, because this was designed for you to mount, install somewhere, tuck it out of the way, and never have to worry about it again. And that way too, no one is looking in the vehicle and seeing a radio that they want to steal. And for even more security, you can actually take out the 2 latches on the side, and this has a quick release so that it comes out, and when you're ready to use it, you just slide it back on, and it slides on really simply, and then you just get it in there and snaps back into place. Here in the front, you have the jack for that microphone, and then right here, that's for USB charging. So if you are using basically this in your cigarette port and you now no longer have a place to charge your phone, well, you can also just put a USB through here, route it out somewhere where you can access it, and now you can charge your phone through there. So everything that's on here is controlled here. This is the main reason why I decided to go with this system. Everything that you need to control this radio with is in the palm of your hands. It's exactly like a handheld. It's just that it has the power of being a mounted unit with a bigger antenna and everything. So this just basically plugs in right there, and then look at this. They give you a little cover too. The dust cover for the USB port, and that covers it there. So now I can mount this somewhere nice and clean. You don't see it, and then this will basically be mounted in the vehicle somewhere. It'll hang on this, and I'm good. Everything you could need is already included in this kit, but if you do decide you want something a little bit more substantial, something that'll give you a little bit more range, there are a couple of antenna options that Midland offers to you. The very first one is part number MXT275. That is their ghost antenna. It's about 2 to 3 inches long. It's stubby and it's very discreet. You can mount it anywhere in the vehicle and no one will even know you really have comms in there. So it's very popular for a lot of people, and that'll get you about 3 dBs of gain. However, if that's still not enough and you want something even more substantial than that with much more range, then you can upgrade to the one I decided to get, which is this bad boy, the MXT826. This is a 6 dB gain antenna, about 31.5 inches long versus 2 to 3 inches, so it's a little bit more noticeable, but it's not like it's super noticeable like the CB antennas where they're like 6 feet high in the air, super thick. This is still somewhat discreet, but will get you the kind of gain and the kind of coverage that you might want. Now, no matter which antenna you decide to get though, if you're gonna upgrade the antenna, you are gonna need to get their 6-meter antenna cable, because the one that comes with this kit won't fit the upgraded antenna, so you will need to buy one of these. This one has an NMO adapter in the front, and that's basically how you screw that in. And then below that is the FME to UHF adapter. On the other side, you can remove this part of the cable, and I'll show you that right now. See, it comes off, and the reason why that's important is you have to route this through the firewall somehow. Imagine trying to route something like this thick through the firewall. I've had issues with that before, but because they allow you to remove it, you can just unscrew it, route this through the firewall real easily, route it up to your radio, and then go ahead and screw this back on, and then go ahead and plug this into the back of the radio, and you are good to go. But basically this whole system, the radio unit, the upgraded antenna, and the upgraded cable, all came out to maybe $210, which I paid for myself, by the way. This is not sponsored by Midland at all. But $210, and you got yourself a really solid GMRS radio unit. Okay, so installation. How do we wire this thing up? Well, with the MXT275 specifically, there are a ton of ways you can do this. And I know everyone has different needs, different ways they want to use the radio, and also different kind of setups in their vehicles. So I'll give you a bunch of different options. You can choose which one works best for you. And then I'll also give you the way I'm installing mine on my Jeep. So let's start with the basics. The foundation of this entire system all hinges on the MXT275 unit. This unit was designed so that you don't ever have to touch it again. You don't have to look at it. You don't have to mess with it, which is why you can hide it in the glove compartment or in the middle console or under the seat, wherever you want. And basically it just stays there forever. Now for me, I do want to mount it somewhere close by, somewhere that I have access to, because it has quick release brackets. So I'll put it on the quick release bracket, use it whenever we're going off-roading or when we're going overlanding, camping, road trips. And then when I'm not using it, just for everyday driving, I can just take it off the quick release bracket, leave it in the house, and I don't ever have to worry about it getting stolen from inside the vehicle. Now, the first thing coming out of that main unit is your microphone. And the biggest selling point for me for this unit was the fact that all the controls are on that microphone. Now, the second thing coming out of that unit is the antenna. Where you decide to mount the antenna is entirely up to you, but Midland does suggest that you try to mount it as high as possible on your vehicle so you can get the best range. Now, no matter where you decide to put the antenna, you are going to need to find a way to get that cable from the back of the unit, which is inside your vehicle, to the antenna, which is outside of your vehicle. Now you can do this a bunch of different ways. You can go through the firewall. I know that for Jeeps, in the door jamb, there's a channel that you can poke through, and then you can run the wire through there. So it'll go from the inside of the vehicle through the dash and then into the engine compartment. Now, as far as mounting that antenna, if you decide to use the antenna that comes with this kit, well, that antenna has a magnetic base, so you can put that on anywhere that's metal. However, if you decide you want to upgrade that antenna to one of Midland's other GMRS antennas to give you better range, then you are going to need to find a way to mount those because those are not magnetic. Fortunately, Midland, as well as many other third-party companies, offer a variety of brackets for you to mount your antennas onto that are both universal and vehicle specific. What you can also do is look at your aftermarket parts, because a lot of times the aftermarket parts that they give you for the outside, they put holes on there for you to mount your antennas onto, such as front bumpers, rear bumpers, tire carriers. They've already placed a little hole on there for you to use for antenna mounting. Just make sure that no matter where you mount your antenna, that it has good ground, good metal beneath it, and also that there's nothing around it that will cause some sort of interference with your signal. Okay, now that we have both of those set up, how do we power this? Well, the third thing coming out of the unit is your power cord. So option number one, plug it in. That easy. Right into your cigarette socket, or what you kids like to call 12-volt DC socket. I'm old school. I come from a time when there were still actual lighters in that thing. All right. That cord is already fused up. You'll notice that there are some inline fuses on that cord. So as soon as you plug it in, you are good and ready to go. Now you might say, that's great, Asia, but I really don't want a cord coming out of the unit and I'm plugging it into a 12-volt DC socket, because now I got cables running everywhere. And on top of that, all my 12-volt DC sockets are already being used up by something else. So I would rather tap into my vehicle's electrical system. Well, then that brings us to option number two, which is direct battery. The direct battery setup is the easiest setup out of all of them, outside of just plugging it in, because all you got to do is take the power cord, snip off the plug at the end of that cord, just make sure you don't take out the fuses, and then take the red wire and tap to the positive end of your battery, then take the black wire and tap to the negative end of your battery or to a ground, and you now have constant power running to the unit. The advantage of this is that even when the vehicle is off, you can still turn the radio on and use it. The disadvantage is that if you forget to turn off that unit and the vehicle is turned off, then that unit may eventually drain your battery and you might wake up the next day wondering why your vehicle won't start. But that's why I wanted the MXT275, because all the controls are on the microphone, which means the power button is on the microphone, which means as long as the microphone is not plugged into that unit, then I know that it's not on. So when I'm not using it, I just have to put the microphone away somewhere, and I am confident knowing that that unit is not slowly draining my battery. And even if I decide to keep the microphone plugged in, that handheld is always within sight, so I can see whether or not it's on. Now you might say to yourself, yeah, that's cool, but I'll probably still end up leaving it on because I just have the bad habit of leaving it on. So I think what I'll do is I'll get a switch, put it on the positive wire, mount that switch somewhere in the vehicle, then I can just turn it on and off. Do not do that. Do not do that, because there's a lot of current running through that positive wire that the switch cannot handle. A switch is not rated for that kind of power, and eventually you're going to overwork that switch. It's going to overheat, and soon you're going to start a fire, and that's something you do not want to happen. Now, if you still feel like you want to turn this thing on and off with a separate switch, you can still do that with the third option, which is direct battery switched. And it's basically the same thing, but instead of putting a switch that can't handle the current on that positive wire, instead you would put a relay. And what a relay does is it controls the current flowing from the battery to the unit that you're trying to power. Okay, so how do I tell the relay to turn on and off? Well, it's really simple. From the relay, you're going to have a wire going to a switch, and from that switch, you have another wire going to your battery. So every time you flick that switch on, current will flow through that wire, turn the relay on, and then that relay will then allow current to flow from the battery to your unit. And then when you flick the switch off, then the relay turns off, and now current can't flow from the battery to your unit. Now, the reason why you can add a switch here is because a relay does not need a lot of power to turn on. It's very, very minimal, that it's enough for that switch to handle. So you're not going to get any kind of burnout when you do it this way. Now, if you don't want to have to turn on a switch just so you can turn on the radio, I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to be flicking switches like I'm flying the Millennium Falcon just to turn the radio on. And if you don't mind not being able to use your radio when the vehicle is off, then you could go with the fourth option, which is ignition only. And it's basically the same setup, but instead of the switch, you now take the wire that's coming out of that relay and plug it into the ACC fuse in your fuse box. Just open up the fuse box, find the ACC fuse, use a tap of fuse, tap right into it, and every time you turn the vehicle on, the radio turns on. Every time you turn the vehicle off, the radio turns off, so you don't have to think about it. It basically turns on just like all the other accessories that's inside your vehicle. Now, no matter which setup you decide to do, if it involves a relay, you're gonna wanna make sure that that relay is as close to the battery as possible, because the wire that's going from the battery to your relay is unprotected. If you look under the hood of your vehicle, you'll notice that all your relays and fuses are very close to the battery, because the farther you are away from your battery, the longer that cord has to be. And the longer that cord is, then the more chances it has of getting caught somewhere or shorting, and then suddenly, because it's not protected, you're gonna start a fire. So the closer you bring it to the battery, the better, so that you lessen the chance of something happening to that wire. Now, the fifth option is a switch pod system. And for those of you who already have a switch pod system set up in your rigs, then you already know where I'm going with this. But for the rest of you who don't already have a switch pod system set up or don't even know what a switch pod system is, I did do an install of the Auxbeam 6-gang switch pod, and you can find that video on my channel. But basically, it's really simple. It's a system that's already set up with relays and fuses, and all you gotta do is take the positive and negative wire of your radio, plug it into one of the channels of your switch pod, which correlates to a switch inside the vehicle, and then you just have to turn that thing on to turn the radio on. But again, yeah, you're back to that same situation where you got to turn one thing on just to get the radio to go on. So I know that for me, that's not gonna fly. Plus, the downside about these switch panel systems is that they're all ignition reliant, which means that nothing that's plugged into my switch pod system will work unless I turn the vehicle on, which means off-road lights, which means rock lights, roof lights, which is fine because I don't need to use those things unless I'm moving anyway. But when it comes to the radio, I kind of want to be able to use it even when the vehicle is off. I want to be able to check for weather. I want to be able to use it around camp. I want to be able to have conversations without having to turn the vehicle on to do so. So this kind of setup won't work for me. So what I'm going to do is also a direct battery setup, but on steroids. A few months ago, I released a DIY power distribution hub video. If you want, go check it out so you can see the full details of it, because I'm not going to get into all of that right now. But basically, it's like a switch pod without it being reliant on the ignition being on. In a nutshell, I basically have very large 2-gauge wires coming out of my battery and into a power distribution hub. And on that power distribution hub, there are 6 channels, each with a fuse on it. And all I have to do is plug in positive and negative wires to each channel to power whatever it is I want to power, so long as I'm not adding a switch to those lines. Because again, you don't want to overpower those switch with very high draws. So certain things that I have plugged into it right now are a few more 12-volt sockets in the back so I can charge things up or plug things in. And I also have my fridge plugged to the power distribution block so it can continuously get power from the battery, because you want your fridge to keep running even when the vehicle is off. So that's what I'm going to do with this as well. I'm just going to take the positive and negative wire of the radio and plug it into one of the channels of my power distribution block. So now it's getting constant power from the battery. Now, as far as dealing with forgetting to turn it on and off, well, that's why I got this unit. The MXT275, as long as the microphone is not plugged into the unit itself, then I know it's not on. And even if it is on, I can still see the display and know whether or not I left it on or not. But basically, that's how I'm setting my system up. I've done enough talking and I'm too excited to get this thing installed. So let's just go and do it. First thing I needed to do was cut off the plug at the end of the power cord, then extend the power cord with 14-gauge wire. I then tested the connection by plugging it into the power distribution block to make sure it turns on. Next step was to mount the bracket to my overhead MOLLE panel and make sure there's clearance all around it. Then I routed the wire from the power distribution block up the B-pillar through the roll cage and into the unit. For the antenna wire, I started from the outside and routed it through the gap in the door jamb. From there, I was able to go up the pillar, behind the windshield trim, and into the unit. Back in the engine bay, I wanted to not have to coil the wire, so I went through the back, up the side, and then underneath to the front bumper to make use of the entire line. Now I know some people might disapprove of me mounting the antenna on the bumper, but it already has an antenna mount I would like to try and use. I can always relocate the antenna if I don't get a good connection here. Huh? Yeah? I'm pretty kind of stoked. I now have comms in the Jeep. I've been wanting one of these for a very long time. It was just never high on my priority list, but now that I have it, I can't wait to try it out. I kind of also am wishing a storm would happen just so I can check the weather and get updates. Actually, don't wish for that. Like, that's not cool. You don't want to go through that again. But yeah, installation, super quick, super easy. It made me really glad I also got the Molly Platform Solutions overhead panel because it just mounted on there really nicely. It's within reach, I can see everything, and if I want to remove the radio unit, I can just slide it off the quick release brackets really easily, put it away somewhere, and not put it back on until we need to use it. So that way, no one is trying to break into the Jeep and stealing that. Now, some of you might fire away at me in the comments about the placement of my antenna, and quite frankly, I'm also kind of concerned about how it's going to perform there, but I won't know that until I start trying it out. All I know is that every time I've seen ads for the ARB stubby bumper, they've always put the antenna right at that same spot, and I like how it looks there. Now I know, function over form, but I do want to try it out here and see if I get good range with it. If it doesn't work out, I can always relocate it. It's not like it's permanent, so just chill out if it's not the right place. And I'll let you know if it's not working well. I will more than gladly move it somewhere else where I can get better range, because at the end of the day, that's really what's important. Speaking of range, I'm not going to be testing out the range of this unit in this video because one, this video is already long enough and it's supposed to be dedicated to just the installation of the Midland MXT275. And number two, I want to wait till I'm around my friends who also have mobile units in their vehicles, so we can really test how far this thing will go. I mean, I can test that now because I do have handheld units, but if the signal isn't good, I'm not going to know if it's because of my unit or the antenna placement, or I'm trying to talk to a handheld that doesn't have a lot of power in it. So I would rather just wait and put that in the next video. In the next video, I will be targeting the range, and I'll also show you how to use all the different functions that are on this radio, and it'll be dedicated to specifically to that. So just make sure you stay tuned for that video to come out. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, consider also following us on Patreon so that we can continue to make content like this, and as always, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Baptism Overland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I will see you next time.